So I guess the first question we have for you, considering you're working with like sophomores generally considered like JVers, so what
Mhm.
do you think the biggest shift is when you're going from the JV level debate to varsity debate?
Good question. Um, I think the biggest thing is probably dealing with more technical teams and not like over adapting. So there's lots of instances where, um, at least like one question I get a lot is like, how do I deal with second rebuttal if they dump 25 turns in first rebuttal, or how do I deal with first summary if in second rebuttal they like completely frontline all of their case and they read like 15 responses to ours. Um, and yeah, that's definitely like, in my opinion, the biggest or the hardest thing going from JV to varsity. Um, and yeah, there's like different ways to deal with that. I think the best way is to just develop your own style that clashes with those different, like more technical forms of debate. Um, so yeah, like if it's a more lay panel, obviously focusing on like the narrative is a lot more important. And if it's a more tech panel, you are going to have to learn those like more technical skills, like word efficiency, doing lots of drills and stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think definitely one of the most like important things about being able to debate when people are reading a lot of stuff is just being super efficient. So do you have any like drills in particular that you recommend for efficiency?
Yeah, so real quick, obviously like redos are the number one drill. Everyone does them. There's two permutations of redos that I think are really helpful for this. The first permutation is doing like everything you possibly or everything you need to do in your summary or everything you think you could do in your summary, regardless of how much time it takes, and then cutting back on the time. So if it takes you 5 minutes the first time, that's fine. Record yourself, listen to yourself, make notes of the inefficient places where you're like saying things too slow or like over explaining or just focusing on a part on a piece of the round that's less relevant and then cutting those out or giving the same speech in a shorter amount of time. That's the first one. The second one is, and this is if you're not necessarily sure, like where you're wasting time in summary word efficiency wise, but something I like to do is like give a redo of a round or of like a summary or final focus, record it yourself, type it up word for word on a Word doc, and then like every time you see the word or like anything like that or any like filler words, delete those. Make a new edit where like everything is just like perfect rhetoric, perfect word efficiency. Everything sounds exactly like it should when you're doing a redo in the shower or thinking about how you could have won the round the night after. Then read that version and then give the redo without like your brand new script that you just made. That way you like can change sentences. That way they're ideal as opposed to like inefficient in your original one. And it's also easier to see like the individual like stutters or word inefficient phrases you happen to say. So like I used to say right now in the status quo, which is like redundant and wastes time. So you'll catch like tiny things like that that you can do better over time.
Yeah,
Right.
I think one thing I notice a lot when I'm watching novice rounds is that most of them have stuff like that, which is like a crutch word, right? So some people focus on like my opponents. People say my opponents all the time. You don't need to say it maybe once, if that many times. But there are a lot of other
Yeah.
ones. Definitely redos are a good way to catch that.
Yeah, and the other thing I was gonna say is like, in general, transcription redos or like writing everything out beforehand or after looking at a redo is one of the better things you can do because people, in terms of redos, sort of just get stuck on repeating your speech over and over again, and like between like the fifth and sixth redo or so, there's not a whole lot of improvement. But if you like, do a transcription redo, and especially something that you can do if you have like a friend or a more experienced debater on your team, you can have them look at the transcription and look at things that you could be doing more efficiently or have a coach look at your redos. That's also a good way to figure out what you're doing wrong. And I think some just general things a lot of novices do that probably need to be like improved efficiency wise. Signposting inefficiently is always a big one. Like Zayne talked about, like right now in the status quo on their first contention about blah, 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 and you explain along or like you have a long explanation of your opponent's case or just small things like that that you sort of realize you don't really need the later you go on. But yeah, I think redos are probably the number one thing to get you from less levels of experience to more experienced debating levels.